Hello, everybody. This is Joseph P. Farrell with news and views from the Nefarium on Thursday, May 5th, 2016. Don't forget, everybody that's a member of the website, we have an African European members vid chat tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock U.S. Central Time. So, anyway, this was a hard week for me to decide what to talk about because I've been getting so many excellent articles and thoughts from people, but I wanted to concentrate again on France. This is a week that Vive la France may be, may be springing very easily to people's lips because there's something that's going on here, and I think France is really kind of speaking for most of Europe. All right, France is assuming the role now of leadership in the European Union because Merkel has just absolutely proven to be a disaster. Although Francois Hollande is not a strong leader, but he's in a stronger position than Frau Merkel. And what I'm talking about is the coming French rejection of Russian sanctions, number one, and of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the TTIP agreement. And I want to start out with an article that's talking about that agreement first, the TTIP agreement. This is an article titled "Doubts Rise Over TTIP as France Threatens to Block EU-US Deal." Now, I'm going to read about 3 paragraphs from this article, and I want you to listen very closely. Listen between the lines, as it were. Here's the first quotation. Quote, Francois Hollande said on Tuesday he would reject the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership at this stage because France was opposed to unregulated free trade. Earlier, France's lead trade negotiator had warned that a halt in TTIP talks is the most probable option. Matthias Fäkel, the minister responsible for representing France in the TTIP talks, blamed Washington for the impasse. He said Europe had offered a lot but had received little in return. He added, quote, there cannot be an agreement without France and much less against France. Now I'm skipping to the second quotation. The gulf between the two sides was highlighted by a massive leak of documents on Monday, first reported by The Guardian, which revealed irreconcilable differences on consumer protection and animal welfare standards. The publication of 248 pages of negotiating texts and internal positions obtained by Greenpeace and seen by The Guardian showed that the two sides remain far apart on how to align regulations on the environment and consumer protection. Greenpeace said the leak demonstrated that the EU and US were in a race to the bottom on health and environmental standards, but negotiators on both sides rejected these claims. And then the third quotation. Hollande, who is beset by dire poll ratings, indicated on Tuesday that the government has other concerns about the TTIP. Speaking at a conference on the history of the left, Hollande said he would never accept the undermining, quote, of the essential principles of our agriculture, think GMOs, folks, our culture, and of mutual access to public markets, unquote. Now, as I indicated, I think that's a euphemistic way of saying GMOs, all right? Let me continue with the final and fourth quotation here from this article. Quote, the question marks over the TTIP are a setback for the British Prime Minister, David Cameron, who last year vowed to put rocket boosters under the talks as he described the TTIP as, quote, a deal we want, unquote. But Barack Obama has made it clear that the UK would not get any special treatment if it left the EU and decided to negotiate a separate trade deal. Now, let me stop right there with that quotation because this illustrates the problem. That one statement by President Obama to Prime Minister Cameron. If the United Kingdom has nothing to gain either way, then why does the United Kingdom stay in the, quote, special relationship with the United States? And the same thing can be asked about France and every other European country. Why continue this charade when the TTIP is clearly weighted to favor American corporations, American banks, and so on and so forth? Now, as I said, I think there's something else lurking behind the scenes here, but we'll get to that after I share this other article with you. This article is titled France to Dump Russia Sanctions. Real Germans never really heeded them, all right? And I've suspected something like this has been going on. I want to read just 3 short quotations from this article, actually one long one, but a couple of short ones and then a long one. And then I'm going to give you what I think may be going on here in my high-octane speculation of the day. So here we go. Quotation number 1. France is tired of the suffering caused by needless, baseless sanctions imposed on Russia. So French parliamentarians just approved a resolution not to renew sanctions on Russia. And I did indeed blog about this a couple of days ago. The French National Assembly has passed a resolution calling for an end on sanctions. And as I indicated in that blog, this now is giving Monsieur Hollande some maneuvering room, all right? He can now say, well, I'm being pressured domestically. And he probably, in all likelihood, as the previous article indicated, is not in favor of these things to begin with. Let me continue with the quotation. And as for Germany, some experts suggest the Germans simply ignored the sanctions all along. Here's the latest look at the idiocy of economic suicide of the so-called West and what it heaped on Europe. Now let me skip to the second quotation. Chancellor Merkel and the rest of the German Bundestag can rant and rave and wax as profoundly as they wish. But the down-to-earth people and the companies they lead, theirs is the business that has powered Germany for generations. They have made their own decisions already. A case in point, a family-owned company known as VEKA, that's V-E-K-A-A-G. The news that VEKA is partnering with Kirch Production Enterprises, known as Line SK, in opening a new center for Windows technologies speaks volumes about who is really powerful in Germany. While the French and many other European nations seem fed up with losing wages, revenue, and growth in order to rescue NATO and the American alliance, and this is precisely the perception that I think is going on behind the scenes in Europe, even with the leadership class, that they're rescuing NATO and the American alliance. And the TTIP agreement is a case in point. So bear that in mind, and let's get back to the quotation. German industrialists wave a casual hand at Merkel and the political talkers. So let's go on to the third quotation. This is where the rubber meets the road. Quote, finally, the former Italian Prime Minister Romano Prodi is calling for the lifting of sanctions. He says lifting the sanctions, these are the sanctions against Russia, can have a greater political effect than keeping them. Just recently, the Spanish Foreign Minister José Manuel García Margallo called for the restoration of the strategic partnership between Russia and the European Union. So add Italy and Spain in addition to France and the quiet German revolt. Austrian president, now add Austria, Heinz Fischer has spoken in favor of lifting the EU sanctions from Russia. The trend toward dumping sanctions is swayed. Even Finland is leaning toward favoring its old trading partner where NATO expansion is concerned. Old Cold War strategies simply do not bode well for progress and a Europe that needs fresh ideas. Obama is headed to the lecture circuit and the presidential library building come November. Cameron is one foot in the political grave and the other on a corruption banana peel in the United Kingdom. Merkel has ruined her credibility and has made deals with the Turkish blackmailers. Hollande of France, though comic for the French people, is the only leader in the mix with any buoyancy. Sanction Russia was and is a joke. The USA circumvented these sanctions almost throughout the course, as evidenced by allowing the delivery of Russian rocket engines, delivery deals, and a wide range of other investments. For many powerful entities, hurting the Russian or European citizen led to huge profits or just business as usual. And this is not just my opinion. This is, by the way, Phil Butler, the author of this article. A recent poll confirmed and conducted by the German-Russian Chamber of Commerce has found that 80% of companies, 80% of companies that have trade links with Russia believe that economic sanctions are not having their desired effect. German investment in the new Russian Railways Silk Road effort is well publicized. Italian investors are hot to put money into Russian wines. And I guess you get the point already, unquote. Now, what does all of this mean? What does all of this portend? And I'm going to suggest something here that is so totally off the wall, but nonetheless, I've been thinking about this for a long, long time. And that is, first of all, number one, as I've said before, Britain has nothing to gain from this continued quote-unquote special relationship with the United States, and it really isn't gaining anything out of the Trans-European Partnership. It's not gaining anything from the EU. So I've been expecting Britain eventually, over a long term, is going to break with the EU. But as far as Europe itself is concerned, I've been insisting all along that economic reality would propel Europe into a much closer relationship with Russia, and for that matter with China, than with the United States. The United States is trying to cling to an alliance system now that is working against it, and the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, the TTIP deal, is being rejected because it is so slanted in favor of the United States. But this, to me, is an indicator of what may be really going on behind the scenes. And what I suspect this may be is that the European powers and Russia have performed a generations-long analysis of the American deep state, of the American political structure. And what they see is a huge federal bureaucracy that is allied to the defense contractors, to the military-industrial complex, to the central bankers, and to American corporations. That's the deep state. And that now is a global entity, all right? America, the American government, is the front for something else that is a deep corporate sort of fascist state. I've been calling it Nazi International. You can call it international mafia. Whatever this thing is, the European powers and Russia have looked at it and said, that's our enemy. And I suspect what you are now going to see is a gradual peeling away of Europe from that entity. And I suspect as well, my friends, and I hate to say this, but I suspect as well that these nations realize that their national culture, their identity, their civilization is at stake and under threat from Mr. Global, essentially, all right? And that they are now taking the steps to distance themselves from it, and here it comes, prepare for an inevitable war with that structure, all right? So in other words, I think what you see behind the scenes is France, Germany, Russia, Italy, and so on, recognizing that they're no longer negotiating with the United States of America. They are negotiating with a government that is now hostage to interests that are not in Europe's best interest. This is why I think we've seen President Putin, that we've seen Prime Minister Orban of Hungary taking direct aim at the dogma of the globalists, and that is the obsolescence, or so-called or alleged obsolescence, of the nation state. We've seen recently in support of this thesis. We've seen recently the effort to oust and impeach President Dilma Rousseff in Brazil, and again, that opposition to her is coming from those globalist corporate interests in Brazil that basically represent American corporate interests. So what is being challenged now, I think, is the beginning of a process. France has initiated something. I don't think this is going to go away because, as I've pointed out in these articles, Italy's on board, Spain's on board. Eventually, this is going to transform Europe, and it's going to transform the NATO alliance. And then we're going to see much more open criticism and critique of the whole globalist agenda coming from Europe. So this is one to watch, folks. This is an important development in France. I don't think it's going to go away. If I'm wrong, of course, it will go away or appear to go away. But I think you're going to see more and more critique along the lines of Mr. Putin and Mr. Orban taking direct aim at the idea of corporate governance of the world coming out of the European Union itself. All right, if I'm correct, and it's going to be the political class within Europe, particularly that professional bureaucratic political class in France, that's going to, I think, to start making this critique, and it will spread. So that's it for my news and views. Don't forget we have the members vid chat tomorrow at 2 p.m. for European and African members. The new books are out, folks. Just give it time to circulate through the distribution system. If you want the new books, you can order them directly, Rotten to the Common Core directly from Feral House, and Hidden Finance, Rogue Networks, and Secret Sorcery directly from Adventures Unlimited. I'll see you tomorrow for everybody in the vid chat, and until the next time, I'll see you on the flip side, everybody.